Before the name United States was ever drawn on a map, the land belonged to the indigenous peoples, Cherokee, Navajo, Sioux, and many others, who lived in relative harmony with nature, hunting, farming, and celebrating under skies, without borders. Before the declaration of the American state and relations with indigenous peoples before the United States of America became an independent nation, North America was home to millions of indigenous people who had lived there for thousands of years, distributed across hundreds of tribes diverse in culture, language, and customs. Each tribe had its own social and political systems, farming and hunting techniques, and spiritual rituals deeply connected to nature and the land. The arrival of Europeans and the beginning of change in the late 15th century, Europeans, led by Spanish, English, French, and Dutch explorers, began arriving on the shores of the continent. They brought advanced weapons and diseases previously unknown to the indigenous peoples, such as smallpox and measles, causing a tragic and significant population decline. Early relations between some tribes and settlers were based on trade, with Europeans obtaining furs and corn in exchange for metal weapons and tools. However, as the English, French, and Dutch colonies expanded, conflicts over land grew. Europeans viewed land as private property to be bought and sold, whereas indigenous peoples saw it as a sacred communal inheritance that could not be owned. Conflicts and massacres as colonies spread, multiple wars erupted between settlers and tribes, such as the Pequot War, 1636 to 1638, and King Philip's War, 1675 to 1678, leading to the deaths of thousands of indigenous people and the destruction of their villages. Colonists continually sought to displace tribes from their fertile lands, either through treaties, often broken, or through direct military force. The path toward displacement by the 18th century, with the influx of European immigrants, indigenous presence in the eastern part of the continent diminished drastically. Many tribes were forced westward to less fertile lands, culminating in the 19th century's infamous Trail of Tears. A complex legacy before the Declaration of Independence in 1776, North America was already marked by tension and conflict between European settlers and indigenous peoples. This period left a legacy of open wounds, with lasting social, cultural, and political consequences as indigenous peoples lost most of their lands and saw their cultures destroyed or marginalized. In 1492, Christopher Columbus arrived on the continent, initiating waves of European exploration, Spanish, French, and English. By the 17th century, British colonies began spreading along the eastern seaboard. Between 1775 and 1783, the American Revolutionary War broke out under the leadership of George Washington, ending with the Declaration of Independence on July 4, 1776, and the birth of a new nation. George Washington, 1789 to 1797, hero of independence, established the foundations of governance. John Adams, 1797 to 1801, maintained national unity amid tensions with France. Thomas Jefferson, 1801 to 1809, purchased Louisiana from France, doubling the country's size. James Madison, 1809 to 1817, led the War of 1812 against Britain. James Monroe, 1817 to 1825, introduced the Monroe Doctrine to protect the continent from European intervention. John Quincy Adams, 1825 to 1829, focused on infrastructure development. Andrew Jackson, 1829 to 1837, controversial policies toward indigenous peoples. Martin Van Buren, 1837 to 1841, faced a major economic crisis. William Henry Harrison, 1841. Shortest presidency, died after 1 month. John Tyler, 1841 to 1845. Annexed Texas. James K. Polk, 1845 to 1849. Major territorial expansion. Zachary Taylor, 1849 to 1850. Died in office. Millard Fillmore, 1850 to 1853. Compromises over slavery. Franklin Pierce, 1853 to 1857. Internal conflicts paving the way to the Civil War. James Buchanan, 1857 to 1861. Failed to prevent division. Abraham Lincoln, 1861 to 1865. Led the Civil War, freed the slaves, assassinated. Andrew Johnson, 1865 to 1869. Reconstruction of the South. Ulysses S. Grant, 1869 to 1877. Post-Civil War stability. Rutherford Hayes, 1877 to 1881. End of Reconstruction. James Garfield, 1881. Assassinated after a few months. Chester Arthur, 1881 to 1885. Government reforms. Grover Cleveland, 1885 to 1889. Fought corruption. Benjamin Harrison, 1889 to 1893. Economic expansion. Grover Cleveland, 1893 to 1897. Returned for a second term. William McKinley, 1897 to 1901. War with Spain, assassinated. Theodore Roosevelt, 1901 to 1909. Environmental reforms, built the Panama Canal. William Taft, 1909 to 1913. Judicial development. Woodrow Wilson, 1913 to 1921. Led the U.S. in World War I. Warren Harding, 1921 to 1923. Political scandals, died in office. Calvin Coolidge, 1923 to 1929. Economic prosperity before the Great Depression. Herbert Hoover, 1929 to 1933. The Great Depression. Franklin Roosevelt, 1933 to 1945. World War II. Longest-serving president. Harry Truman, 1945 to 1953. Bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Dwight Eisenhower, 1953 to 1961. Economic growth, start of the Cold War. John Kennedy, 1961 to 1963. Cuban Missile Crisis, assassinated. Lyndon Johnson, 1963 to 1969. Vietnam War. Richard Nixon, 1969 to 1974. Resigned over the Watergate scandal. Gerald Ford, 1974 to 1977. Restored trust after Watergate. Jimmy Carter, 1977 to 1981. Iran hostage crisis. Ronald Reagan, 1981 to 1989. End of the Cold War. George H. W. Bush, 1989 to 1993. Gulf War. Bill Clinton, 1993 to 2001. Economic growth, Monica scandal. George W. Bush, 2001 to 2009. 9/11 attacks, Iraq War. Barack Obama, 2009 to 2017. Healthcare reforms, Osama bin Laden killed. Donald Trump, 2017 to 2021. Controversial policies, COVID-19 crisis.
46. Joe Biden, 2021 to 2025. Complete withdrawal of U.S. forces from Afghanistan. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, activate the notification bell, like the video, and share it on your social media pages so we can continue bringing you more historical videos and meaningful stories.